how do they propose to get a peace agreement when Putin said he won't agree if they do this?
Well, it's been a tricky week all round in terms of US-European diplomacy after the leaking of messages from Trump officials in a group chat. Let's speak now to Fred Fleitz, former Chief of Staff at the US National Security Council during President Trump's first term. Mr. Fleitz, welcome to the programme.
Good to be here.
It's great to have you on. Shall we start with the efforts by European leaders today to try to progress towards peace and President Zelensky's concern about the pace of all of this and that the US actually is not recognising the pace that really the situation demands? Is the US causing something of a hold-up to proceedings?
Well, I think the efforts to put together this coalition of the willing are admirable, but I actually think it will make peace less likely. And Starmer and Macron seem determined to put together some kind of enforcement mission that would force the Russians to abide by a ceasefire. There will be no peace if this is their approach. That force is never getting into Ukraine, and it would be more productive if European leaders would talk about a bona fide peacekeeping force to verify a ceasefire and a peace agreement, rather than some kind of military force that is prepared to attack Russian troops. It's a bad idea. I don't know where it came from. It wasn't on the table a few months ago. And I wish that European states, especially the British and the French, would get with the program and the Trump administration to find a serious way to end this war rather than pushing something that's frankly pointless.
So what is the programme, if not a peacekeeping force, if what you say is right, that the coalition of the willing would make peace less likely? What is the programme?
The coalition of the willing is not a peacekeeping force.
Fine.
It is it's similar to the S4 force that was used in Bosnia. It's a peace enforcement mission. It's a military operation to compel parties, or at least in this case, one party, to agree to a ceasefire. And I mean, that may sound great in theory, but the Russians will not agree to that. If we want to get a ceasefire, that can't be part of it, unfortunately.
So what is the deterrent to preventing Russian aggression in future?
Well, I wrote a paper on this with General Keith Kellogg last spring. We think at a minimum there has to be a robust peacekeeping force along a demilitarized zone, and Ukraine has to be armed to the teeth. That's the deterrence. Give Ukraine the weapons it needs to prevent Russia from reinvading. But putting NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine, Russia will not agree to a peace agreement under those circumstances. And Putin has made that clear. I don't think he's kidding. So let's try to find a way where we can bring peace to Ukraine, not put forward proposals that will prevent that from happening.
Are Starmer and Macron naive to continue pursuing this?
Yes, they are. And I mean, how do they propose to get a peace agreement when Putin said he won't agree if they do this?
Who would be in the demilitarized zone? Is this then a job for the UN or the US? How would that work?
I don't have an answer to that, and I've discussed that with European leaders, whether this would be a UN or some type of non-UN organization, maybe through the OSCE. When there is a peacekeeping force deployed, traditionally parties to the dispute have a say on which nations are included. Now, Putin is saying he doesn't want any troops from NATO nations to participate in a bona fide peacekeeping mission. I think that's up to negotiation, but there are a variety of states with experience in peacekeeping: Ireland, Nepal, India, Egypt. The Scandinavian states have experience, although whether Putin would agree to them or not, I don't know. But I think this is negotiable.
Yeah. Is the reality actually then, Fred Fleitz, that the US needs to step up? There seems to be a thawing of diplomatic relations between Russia and the US. So actually, why wouldn't a US force be acceptable to Putin?
I don't think American troops should serve as peacekeepers because I think they're simply targets for terrorism. You have to have states that are seen as non-intimidating, states that are neutral to serve in this role. And there are states who have a reputation for doing that successfully. And I agree the relations between the U.S. and Russia are thawing. They're thawing a little bit too slowly, and I hope they can improve to the extent that we get some real serious concessions by the Russians soon.
Yeah, and at this point, the one take on this is that Russia really is stalling for time, that actually that means that there is more pressure on Ukraine to make concessions, all the while they are presenting this sort of willing front that helps President Trump view them more favourably, perhaps. But in reality, Russia's not giving up much. Today, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, of course, says a deadline of weeks or months must be considered here before sanctions and pressure are put on Russia in order that peace can follow. Do you think there should be a deadline? Should we put an end point on this?
Well, President Trump and his Ukraine special envoy, Keith Kellogg, they've talked about that. They have a deadline in mind. I don't know what it is. I would say it's probably months, but I do know that President Trump's his patience will run out eventually if the Russians keep dragging their feet.
Yeah, it's fascinating that just the concept of a deadline, especially since President Zelensky says nobody else is moving fast enough. When he is a leader of a wartime nation, the rest of the world is always moving too slowly.
Yeah, I don't know why he said that, because he was not supporting President Trump's efforts to get an immediate ceasefire. So this is a new position by Zelensky.
Right. What do you think could be behind that? Indeed, what do you think could be a response to that?
I don't have an explanation. I'm just making an observation.
Yeah. Will that anger President Trump?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think Trump is determined to work with the Russians right now and to get them to walk back positions they put forward that make a peace agreement impossible.
Yeah. How difficult a week has this been for the Trump administration after a journalist was invited into a Signal group chat by various very senior officials, the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, who were all planning a military strike via group chat on Signal. Does that make this a particularly tumultuous, difficult week for President Trump?
Well, this journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg of the liberal Atlantic magazine, was invited in by just one journalist, Michael Waltz, the National Security Advisor.
To be clear, a Trump administration official, yeah.
Yes. Waltz and the president have said that this was a mistake. Waltz has admitted it is a mistake. He's learned from this mistake, and they're going to do better in the future. There's going to be an investigation and a study of regulations on how and when Signal can be used for discussions with senior officials. CIA Director John Ratcliffe said that they were following established procedures of the Biden administration for the use of Signal. I don't particularly agree with that. I don't think Signal should be used for discussions like this. So if that was the rule, I hope it is revised so we can have much better security for sensitive discussions when a military operation is taking place.
Is it right that nobody has been fired? How can that be an acceptable response to something so egregious as this?
I think the mark of a good leader is that when one of your people makes a mistake, you have their back, you give them another chance. No one was killed here. No serious intelligence was compromised. Mistakes are going to be made at the beginning of an administration, and I think that President Trump did the honorable thing of standing behind Michael Waltz.
The other side of that is that there's no accountability in the administration.
I don't see it that way. I think that there's been pretty intensive criticism, and Waltz has been embarrassed, which I think is an issue. But look, this is a mistake made at the beginning of an administration, and the response is going to be they're evaluating the rules on the use of these secure chat rooms and other ways of communicating between senior officials to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I wonder as well, and I'm not an expert on the following, so I'm keen for your take, Mr. Fleitz. The Espionage Act, the Presidential Records Act, the Federal Records Act, they lay out rules for how to handle classified information, and those laws apply to every one of the people in this group chat. Have laws been broken?
Well, I was executive secretary of the National Security Council, so I'm familiar with the Presidential Records Act and other rules and regulations concerning protecting classified information. And I was concerned that Signal would be used in situations like this because I don't see how they could be consistent with these laws and regulations. However, the Biden administration made some kind of changes to the rules that permitted Signal to be used in these situations. And it was that guidance that allowed Signal to be used here. I'm not sure that that guidance is right. It's being evaluated. But I mean, there was a justification that U.S. officials can point to where they thought they had it right. I think this is going to be reevaluated. It wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if a decision is made that U.S. officials can't use signal in the future. But I know the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee said that this change by the Biden administration was made consistent with rules on document retention and protecting classified information.
Fascinating. Fred Fleitz, it's a great pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for your time.